Live from the Julius Arthur Leonard Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's TC at Home, presented by Theater Charlotte. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Timmons. Welcome in to another episode of TC at Home. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great show tonight with our guests, Rob Addison and Savvy Jillani. In case you missed it, episode 2 is now on our Facebook page. It did not post live when we recorded it a couple weeks back, but you can find it along with all of our other virtual programming anytime you want on our Facebook page and on YouTube. If you have about 6 hours to spare, you can revisit our virtual nights for singing, which featured over 40 performers, and together you helped us raise over $12,000 for Theater Charlotte. So thank you all for supporting us. Thank you to everyone who participated during that broadcast. We are also fresh off of our 24-hour virtual theater project, which concluded last night. We had 5 plays written, cast, rehearsed, directed, performed in 24 hours. And you can see those performances along with interviews with our writers and directors. Again, check out Facebook or YouTube for that. So this evening, I want to bring in our first guest today. Let's bring in Savvy Jillani, who is going to be playing Patient 19 in Quarantine the Musical. Hi, Savvy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. We were just chatting backstage. It's Peter and the Starcatcher. We were just talking how it feels like it was just a little while ago, a couple of months, and it's coming up on almost 2 years ago. That's crazy. So tell me, you mentioned in your bio that you have been doing theater and costuming around here since 2004, which makes, anybody that's been around the community that long has seen a lot of changes, and it kind of makes you sound old, although you're not old. So tell us a little bit about your theater journey. I mean, tell us, what you've been doing since 2004.
Yeah, so mostly at the beginning of my career, it was a lot of acting classes, which began right around when I was 8 years old, and then I started doing plays on stage when I was 12 in 2004. And you're definitely right about that. I've really seen kind of the environment of Charlotte theater change quite a bit. It has grown in its own way, and the culture of it has certainly shifted in its own way. And given as involved as I was in high school, it gave me a chance to kind of look at other avenues of theater, not just performance. So I did a whole lot of backstage tech work. I did a lot of costume work because I have sewing in my family. So it's a skill that I already had and could bring to theater. And it was really beneficial to have that many ideas of how theater is created. It's one thing to be just a performer and kind of see from the front of the stage, from the center, how kind of everything works. But when you're working backstage and you're working in costuming to see make sure everyone's got what they need, it's a completely different perspective. And I think it has benefited me in a lot of ways to see both backstage and on stage how things work.
That's great. And it's great to hear that from somebody that's got that experience. I mean, I think so many people sort of, gravitate towards one aspect or the other, and especially, we all obviously have to work together, but, it's easy to get caught up in performance and that aspect of it. And, I obviously had to take some acting classes, which that's fine. I had to get through it. It's not my forte either. I prefer the backstage stuff, but it's good to have that well-rounded aspect, environment and all of those things. How have you been staying busy during this quarantine?
Well, I've caught myself up in the mask making circuit, actually. So I have been hard at work doing that. I've probably sewn over 100 masks so far, and I'm still going because businesses are reaching out to me we would like you to mask all of our staff. And so sometimes it's just people wanting one, and then sometimes it's people that want 20 and 30. And so it's all about just keeping your hands busy. So I have been up all night doing that, and that's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I could reach people with that because they've been giving me nothing but compliments, saying how much the mask has just really improved their day-to-day life, their work. And so it's really validating to hear that that's kind of how my skills have been used. So
Absolutely. That's great. Have you seen any masks that you've made on the streets? I mean, is there something that you might recognize that you can go, oh, that's one of mine?
Yeah, you know it is because the ones that I'm making have plastic sheets over the mouth so you can see people talking. So that's why people that
Oh,
have
wow.
issues with hard of hearing or like just comprehension issues, they can see what you're saying. And it's definitely something I would recognize on the streets. And while I have not seen one of my masks yet, there have been things that I have sewn in the past, like garments or something that I've created, that I have seen on the streets, and it's sort of weird in its own little way because it's like, wow, I'm a fashion designer. There's my merchandise. It's a very, but it's very cool.
Yeah, that's great. So, do you have a favorite role that either you've played, or is there a role out there that you really want to sink your teeth into at some point?
It's hard, I think, to pinpoint what my favorite role is when so many roles that I've done have given me such an interesting perspective on things. Like for example, there was a show that I did in college called 448 Psychosis. It is a show written by Sarah Kane, kind of about the human condition existing with mental illness. And so it was something that the entire cast like really had to dive into and just go to the very deepest, darkest place in just that performance knows in order to get to this mindset of what is it like living with mental illness. And so that's, I think it had a lot of lessons in that show that we all came away with, and kind of what that looks like when you translate it into an art piece, because Sarah Kane struggled a lot with mental illness herself. And so the script that we were looking at was really like, it was mental illness on paper. It was like physical embodied mental illness, and it's like, okay, well, this is what this looks like for this person, because mental illness is something that you don't really understand unless you're going through it. And so artists' ability to embody that and put that on stage and make a spectacle out of it is a gift, I think, in its own. And so it becomes a privilege of ours to put on something like that and just bring it to life, I think.
Wow, great. All right, so let's dive into Quarantine the Musical a little bit here. You're playing the mysterious Patient 19. Um, what can you tell us without giving too much away? I know we're just getting into this, the rehearsal process and things like that. What can you tell us about Patient 19?
Yeah, so this character has a lot of, I think, mystery around him because he's sort of a floater in a way. Like he's never, like his relationships with the other characters are never really clear. He's in all the hospital sequences of the musical, which take place basically in the ward that they have walled off specifically for COVID patients. And you really just see him walking around most of the time. And his first couple of scenes where you first see him, he's walking in and checking people's charts that are have been admitted to the hospital, and he's asking people questions about the symptoms. And so right off the bat, you're like, oh, that's a doctor checking people's charts, asking about their symptoms. But then you find out he's not a doctor at all when he's pulled into the room and asked to administer medicine. And then he looks kind of bewildered and he's like, oh no, I'm just a patient, I'm not a doctor. And that's when you realize he's just checking people's charts and asking about their symptoms just because he's nosy. And so everybody's just kind of like, they don't understand what the deal is with this guy, specifically because he looks a little sick, but other than that, he doesn't seem like he's struggling. Like he doesn't seem to be showing any symptoms or anything. So it's like, why is this guy kind of taking up hospital space if he's asymptomatic? And so as the show goes on, you kind of eventually find out why he's admitted when it doesn't seem obvious that he's sick.
Wow, interesting. How are you preparing for a role like this? Is there something I do want to share, because we do have an image, but is there something that you're doing to prepare for this role? I mean, how, obviously, as we've talked to people, some other performers, it seems like people are pulling from, life experiences or things like that. But is there something that how are you approaching this role?
Yeah, so I'm kind of studying, kind of social behavior surrounding like kind of how we're responding to this illness, like how are we covering ourselves, how are we protecting other people, how are we maintaining that distance, because patient 19 exhibits all these things. He wears a mask, he wears his gloves, he stays a distance from people. There are always group sequences where people are huddled together, but he stays 6 feet away. because he knows he's positive. And so I'm kind of studying kind of how behavior, like on a much larger social scale, like grocery stores and Walmart, things like that, are kind of working, and how that behavior changes when you know that you have been tested positive. Because right now we're taking precautions not knowing who's sick, but when you're somebody who you know has the illness, how do you respond to that?
Excellent. All right, so tell us a little bit about the piece that you chose. You chose a monologue for your audition video, and tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Quarantine the Musical. Was there somebody that challenged you? How did you get involved with that, and how did you go about choosing the piece that you're going to perform for us?
Yeah, so I saw the notice to audition on the Theater Charlotte Facebook page, and I thought it sounded great. And I had a lot of friends that I was interested in reaching out to about this challenge, and I decided to pick the monologue that I did because it of itself is like notoriously Shakespeare's most dramatic kind of soliloquy. And so it to me seems like a comedic way to approach this situation while also maintaining this very dark and gritty sort of personality to it.
Excellent. All right, well, I'm going to step aside. I'm going to let you get ready. I'm going to step aside for a second while you do your piece. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Savvy Jillani.
To leave or not to leave, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of prolonged isolation, or to take arms against a global pandemic and by hand-washing end them. To stay, to distance furthermore, and by distancing to say we end the contagions and the 1,000 people unknowingly infected. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To stay, to distance perchance to flatten the curve. Aye, there's the rub. For in that distancing, what stocks may dwindle when we have shuffled off these public streets must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long quarantine. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? The fake news is wrong, the crowd media's contumely, the pangs of unaccountability, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns, the patient merit of unobserved distancing. When he himself might his quietus make with a full roll. Who would Bartles bear to grunt and sweat under a weary solitude, but that the dread of extended quarantine? The undiscovered contagious, from whose body no immunity returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than to fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose in the name of COVID-19.
All right, thank you. So I was thinking about this last night as we did our 24-hour theater project, and I'm going to ask you this, and obviously you don't have to reveal all of your secrets. Did you go through the process of memorizing that, even though you knew it was going to be done virtually?
There were large segments that I did memorize because I did multiple takes of it, and so I was trying not to kind of look at my screen. I had sort of my laptop on standby in case I missed a cue, but for the most part, I was memorizing very large chunks of it so that I wouldn't have to do multiple takes.
Yeah. And folks, if you haven't seen that video, take a look at that, because you spent, it's very slick what you've done as far as editing it together. It's one thing to see it like this, but you took a lot of time. How much time, or talk about a little bit about the process of doing something like that again, because that's not something that we have the luxury of doing when we're performing live. But talk a little bit about the process of filming.
Yeah, so kind of video editing has been just a little side thing of mine for many, many years now. And so It's interesting that I've never really worked in film, but when I approach performance, I take a very, I think, filmmaker's eye to it. Like, how does this look on camera? Which is an interesting, I think, perspective to have, given I have no formal experience in film. But when I heard about the audition, my first thought was to create a film, not necessarily like kind of like a slated audition piece. And so, as I said, I memorized the piece like as best as I could, and I set up one angle, and then I did the piece again from another angle and from another angle, and basically filmed all these different angles to try to capture as many sort of vibes of the performance as I could, and then just kind of strung them together depending on which bit was the strongest. And I knew that I wanted to make the piece as very melodramatic as I could, because the monologue in and of itself is a very dramatic piece. While also adding to kind of the drama of our actual real-time situation, but also having a comedic element to it, because he is talking to an empty roll of toilet paper, not knowing if he should leave the house to get it more or not.
Yeah, again, it's very well done. Thank you for participating in our little challenge there, and being a part of that, and supporting Theater Charlotte in that way. And hopefully we'll get to see each other again at Theater Charlotte soon. Whenever time allows. We'll see how things go. But great job, Savvy. It's great talking to you. Thank you so much for being a part of our show this evening. Take care.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Savvy Jillani. All right. So we're going to bring in our next guest. Some of you may know him as Rob Addison. Some of you may know him as Stinky Rob. And as I was talking, this is my first opportunity to meet you formally, I guess, Rob, and it's a pleasure.
Yes.
It's great to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too, Chris. Strange circumstances, but we'll have to do it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to dive right into your role, because you had my favorite audition piece. Just the way.
Excellent. Oh.
We're going to see this in a minute, but just to look at, if you've got a chance to watch these videos online, and just to see the way that you come into the camera and the whole piece starts is great. It was, again, my favorite. So my question to you is, how do you prepare for a role like this? A role that is being developed along with the writers as this play is being, again, it's a work in progress. It's being developed. So how do you approach a role like this?
I try not to wash as much as possible. I don't wash, very method, get as stinky as possible, and think about how that affects everybody else in the show, and exactly what my effect will be on each of the characters.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this character, Stinky Rob, to me feels like the kind of character that will have an instant cult following.
Oh, excellent. I like that.
Do you feel any pressure knowing that, kind of going into a role like this, and how do you manage those expectations?
Well, a little bit of it's more about what's happening on stage, and it's very much that, because Stinky is so behind the scenes. Almost, he's working his way through things and then taking people out, and people don't know if it's COVID or if it's some other thing, and his aroma is just able to knock people out like that. So approaching that and focusing exactly on what's happening on stage, I just allow that to speak for itself. Or on camera, the way this would be. So.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
It's a different dynamic, I think, for many of us.
Absolutely.
So you obviously you play a teacher in real life.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you have faced during your time outside of the classroom?
Oh, goodness. I'm still currently, we're at the end of it, but still teaching. And the biggest challenge is being a theater teacher, and those other theater teachers who are watching, being a theater teacher and trying to do it online and feel like you're being effective with what you're supposed to be teaching, as well as having fun and still being engaging with the students. And it's been hit or miss with me. I'll put some a assignment out there that some of the kids really get into, and I put something else out there that nobody's really that interested in. And since we're at the end of the year, it was trying to still produce, first of all, enough content where they did fairly, but they're really missing almost the entire performance aspect of the class, which really stinks. No pun intended. But it's tough. I mean, my last assignment for them is a monologue assignment, and they deliver the monologue like we do here, and I give them, and then they go back and work on it and deliver it again, and I just see how they're doing. And one of the best things is that I've stopped worrying about, grades. If it's all effort at this point. If they're putting effort in, and I see that, that's fine with me, because just the fact that they're getting stuff done is the best thing possible. So I hope if they come back next year and things start to get back to normal next year, that we're able to get back on track with things, and really, because part of my mantra in teaching acting is, if you're not doing it, you're not learning it. So it's you got to get up, you got to get on your feet, and you got to do it, and you have to do it with other people, or else you're going nowhere. So that's been the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Are you, so you mentioned monologues and things like that. Are you doing some remote learning with groups? Because I think that's one thing, obviously, that is important, as you mentioned, to our craft, is that collaboration and that peer drive,
Yeah.
from our peers.
Yeah.
It's something that you're incorporating as well. And
it was something.
How do you manage that?
Yeah, the problem is not everybody was involved, and I would have students who wouldn't log on, so it was hard to actually get a group project together. I had a couple sessions online where it was, like this. It was a Zoom call, and I had maybe a quarter of the class show up, and the rest of them would watch a recording of what I put on there and watch that later on. So they weren't involved and able to ask questions and able to get involved. So I didn't want to try to put a group project on top of that. I just kept going back and forth trying to keep them, Josh, Laser Wolf. I kept going back and forth trying to get them to get them involved, and as much interaction as we could with me, because the first assignment I did, I wanted to see how involved they would be. And we were all hit and miss. It was tough. It was really tough. If we're still sort of on a distance learning for the fall, which I hope not, but it might be, I'm going to have to really change things around. But I think if it starts out that way, it'll be totally different. So it's trying to learn how to online is so difficult. So, but we'll see where we go.
Yeah.
We'll see what we get. And stuff like this is totally helping. It's, able to see that we can do this, and it's a big, sort of a experiment on providing theatrical content online and seeing where it goes and what we're able to do. So
yeah, and I would expect that there will be expectations even whenever we're able to perform and collaborate the way that we've been used to doing for so long. I assume that there will be some expectations to carry these sort of platforms and incorporate those into what we do normally.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Absolutely.
Starting fresh. With the mindset going into it, knowing that this is how we have to do things. Can make a difference. Do you have any advice for students of yours or other students who maybe are struggling with, and maybe not necessarily just remote learning? Or as it relates to acting, but just in general, like this, what are you telling your students who maybe are struggling during all of this?
Well, I had one student contact me who actually wasn't a student of mine. I've done shows with him, but he's currently a student, saying, what do I do if I want to go into this now? I'm graduating, and how do I do this? And I said, research. This is the best time for research, and see if you can find some online teachers, online training, keep up with monologue work, keep up with your auditions as much as possible. create as much as you can. And if you can't find ways to create or people to collaborate, make your own content and put it out there. And you see so much more of that now. My students are just trying to get to the end of the year at this point with all of their classes. But some of them, like one student was absolutely into, we were studying Commedia when we left, Commedia dell'arte. And she was absolutely into making Commedia masks. So I took her idea, which was something I was thinking about doing, and she helped sort of do a tutorial on how to do it. So she was still helping create. She was still creating. She sends me pictures of stuff that she's done. She's artistic in that sense. And that's the thing I keep telling kids is just keep creating whenever and wherever you can. Get friends together, create your own content, find ways to do it online, and see what you can get. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit about the Stinky Rob creation, the piece that you chose, and how you got involved in this whole thing.
Oh, goodness. Well, my good friend, Amy Dunn, challenged me, and I thought, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I don't put that together. And I don't know what I was doing, but I was sitting down one day, all of a sudden, Sweeney Todd came into mind. And I started singing just in my head, and I started to write lyrics down. I said, all right, this is it. This is what it's going to be. And Stinky Rob was born. I don't know. It was silly. And I with it. So.
Well, it works. All right.
Yes.
So I'm going to step aside and let you recreate that. So ladies and gentlemen, Rob.
Fabulous. Attend the tale of Stinky Rob. His clothes were rank and their odor odd. He's been stuck in this quarantine. His pants should be changed if you know what I mean. His nasty ways had made him a slob. The Stinky Rob, a smelly victim of quarantine. He tries to turn his couch a line. His students avoid his aroma sublime. What they learn he may never know. On to classes they may never go. With Stinky Rob, a smelly victim of quarantine. Raise your armpits high, Stinky. Spread your bouquet wide. Taking out those who doubt that you're funkified.
Oh my gosh.
There we are.
All right. So just thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Do you have any did you have any projects that you had lined up that tell us a little bit about where you were in terms of your actor career and things.
Yeah, well, we were in the midst at Actors Theater, right in the middle of rehearsal. We had just done our designer run for One Man, Two Governors, and that got called off. And then their next show, unfortunately, their previous show was called off, not for the quarantine, but the show was called off. Then One Man, Two Governors, we're not going to do that. We'll try to go right into their last show, which I was in as well, which was Head Over Heels, the Go-Go's musical, and that they ended up canceling as well. And then I was directing, my first time directing for CPCC Summer Theater. I was directing Baskerville, and that has been delayed at this point and put off until next summer. They're going to do the entire season that they had this season next summer. So yeah, it was very disappointing. I had a very tough week when all three things kind of finally hit me, and it landed that I wasn't going to be involved in theater until the earliest the fall, when I do a show at school I'm the theater teacher at Clover High. And when I decide what I'm doing and if we're going to be able to be there at all. and I'm already starting to look into virtual types of shows, things that we can do where kids aren't right next to each other. But yeah, it was disappointing, but it's fun to be able to do things like this. And thank you guys very much for doing it. This and Peter, Charlotte, and everybody else around who keeps putting content online, encouraging artists to do their readings, and the 24-hour project that you guys just did. Spectacular stuff, and it's so important that we keep doing it. So I thank you very much.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. It's a pleasure again to finally meet you in person, through a screen, obviously. But
yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much for being a part of this, and again, helping us out, Theater Charlotte, and again, all of your work in the community and with students, keeping that going. Obviously, that's the future, and we appreciate our teachers immensely. And as any parent knows, that struggle, we sort of understand a little bit of what you guys, the value. If we didn't know before, we certainly understand how valuable you guys are now. So thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Addison. All right, so that's going to conclude our this edition of TC at Home. Don't forget Theater Charlotte's Isolation Radio Hour on Wednesday at 7:30. Classic radio shows performed live. We also have our TC Teachables on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Next week, we are going to have a special edition of TC at Home, as we are going to sit down with some members of our production team for Quarantine the Musical. We're going to take an opportunity to discuss the challenges of working on this show from behind the scenes, but also what it has been like as a non-performing artist during this time. So please don't miss out on that discussion. On behalf of Theater Charlotte, have a great week and good night.